Thanks so much for coming. Welcome to the first in our chef series events. I'm George from Code. Hopefully you won't be hearing from me too much this evening because I'm not a chef. We've got three amazing chefs with us this evening, and we're just going to sort of chat about, sort of how they got into the industry, and then sort of there's maybe a little bit of a leaning towards sort of the state of the industry and where maybe things are going, because I think it's a really interesting time for chefs, for restaurateurs, for people eating out. There's a lot changing at the moment, and hopefully we'll tap into some of that. But it's all very light-hearted. Yeah, I'll hand over to everyone to introduce themselves. Maybe Shuko, if you want to go first.
Hi everyone, I'm Shuko from Koya restaurant. We specialize in udon noodles, and we are having our 15-year anniversary this year in April, which we don't have any plans for so far, but hopefully there'll be a party or something along that line. Thank you.
Hi guys. Hi. Hi, my name is Masaki. I'm from the restaurant called Dining SW3. We are serving a Japanese food, but with the modern European twist, let's say. And yeah, try to introduce kind of British, Japanese, new, exciting cuisine in this country, in this city, as I love this country. Yeah.
Hi, good evening. I'm Dara. I'm the chef and founder of Tiella. It's a regional rustic Italian kitchen. We were in residence at the Compton Arms pub in Islington for the last couple of years, just finished in December. And yeah, at the point of potentially looking for a brick and mortar. But yeah, that's me.
Cool, and then I guess just like sort of leading on from that, maybe if you're going in that order again, Shuko leading, just if you could let everyone know sort of how you got into being a chef and sort of like your journey to where you are today.
I think I've always liked cooking, even as a child, and but it's not something I originally thought of as a profession. But I did always find myself back into the kitchen. As a student, for example, I started waitressing, but I would hassle the chef about what went into these dishes. And eventually, when there was a space in the kitchen, he asked me if I want to join in the kitchen, to which I said, of course. And that's sort of how I started. And I went back and forth between retail and food a little bit, and then eventually stayed in food.
Cool. So in my case, luckily or unluckily, I was born and raised in a restaurant family back in Japan. And I still remember when I was 15, my parents forced me to come back straight from school while my friends are having fun outside. And the next morning, imagine when I met my, the friends, they tell me all the story, exciting story, what happened yesterday, blah, 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 which I wasn't there. And then I was literally washing the, dishes and, things on carrying the plates and that kind of thing. So I used to hate it. Working in this industry, but somehow I'm still cooking. So I think it's ironic thing of a life. Yeah, but obviously in Japan, traditionally, oldest son needs to take over the family business, so they are counting on me. I was trained, luckily or unluckily, very strict, very strict. I saw lots of flying pounds coming towards me, and I was quite good at it. But anyway, yeah, that's how we started, and I almost ran away from my parents' family business because it was too much, and I came over to London and just fell in love with the city because of the freedom I have, and there's so much opportunities I see in, within the Japanese cooking, because back in the time, I'm talking about 93, 94, Japanese cuisine was not known at all. When I started working in a Japanese restaurant in a Soho, small restaurant, I served the sushi, and then the customer was kind of, hey, what's going on? This is not cooked. Okay, this is called sushi. That's why you ordered. Yeah, this is uncooked sushi, the fish. How can I eat it? Just put it in your mouth. That was a conversation. And then what he did is pick up the soy dish, fill the soy dish with a soy sauce, put the sushi in there, break all the shape, eat it. Next thing, as you can imagine, yes, it's too salty. Okay, thank you very much. Those there. So that was a kind of first kind of experience for me, and then I thought, okay, maybe there's something I can work on. And since then, over 20 years, I'm still here, and then that's what I'm doing.
I was also raised in a restaurant, fortunately or unfortunately. I ran as far as I could from hospitality and studied creative writing, film, got into theatre, and then life took a bunch of twists and turns, and I kind of fell back into working front of house. My mum had more or less retired, and her and I always cooked together when we were hanging out, and I just thought, you know what, I really, really enjoy this. And we started holding pop-ups. That was back in 2018. And over the course of a year, I would still work full-time in an office, and all of my free time I was holding little pop-ups with mum, catering gigs here and there, and discovered I really loved it. And I knew I was going to move to London. And so I sort of took the plunge and decided to work my way up in kitchens and learn from a chef that wasn't my mum. Very good idea. I sort of devoted my life to it, and I've only been a chef in London, so it's been quite a specific sort of example of chefing, but the roots found me, I guess.
And I suppose with each of you there, kind of you touched on the fact that maybe it was something which you kept getting drawn back to, and in some of your cases sort of it maybe felt like an odd option and you tried to sort of maybe escape it at points. I wonder what kept drawing you back to food, and what is it about being in the kitchen specifically that you love so much? Maybe Dara first.
I think it's the energy. It's a very dynamic industry to be in. You're never still or sort of want for something to do. I'm a very creative person, and I found that cooking tended to sort of pull lots of different aspects of my creativity together. And I think just, it sounds really cheesy, but the best part of the job is being around with people. And I worked in offices for 5 years, and I've never dealt with more sort of existential crises day to day. And I hate to say, but kitchens are the only environments where I was sort of able to like zone everything out and be really, really focused. They're a hell of a lot of fun. Yeah.
In my case, probably, what is it? The first of all, I think creativity. What I'm doing is that I try not to step out from the classic Japanese philosophy, let's say. I 100% respect that, but working with the local ingredient, which is a big thing for me, there are lots of challenges, and you need to be creative how to play the ingredient and how to recreate beautiful traditional culture, but suitable for our crowds. And there's always a lot of thoughts. And then also I always, be inspired with other European cuisine, like French, Italian, or whatever. It's got a beautiful history behind it, and I love those philosophies. And to kind of mix with the Japanese tradition without breaking the boundaries is a kind of addictive process for me. And also the restaurant, working in a kitchen especially, is a very stressful environment. When it's come to crunch time, hundreds of tickets in front of you, and the chefs are shouting at each other, blah 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 blah. It's very stressful. And then if you're cooking something, and if you overcook it, then you know what's going to happen. The domino is going to collapse. So the pressure's on, and then these moments, at one point, adrenaline comes in, and this is addictive drug in my head. And it's so enjoyable. And then when the rhythm, everybody got to the same rhythm, that's absolutely beautiful moment. And that's a part of the beautiful thing about working in a kitchen, I think.
I completely agree with the adrenaline part as well. I think there's something very addictive about being in the moment of that rhythm and going through those tickets and serving those food. Also, I think for me, serving food is quite a personal thing as well. And it's about people, but it's also quite a personal act to cook something and then offer it to someone, and someone actually puts it in their body. It's quite therapeutic, and also quite a strong kind of way of saying anything or a message, and I think that's what I value the most.
And I suppose, yeah, sort of you saying about sort of that connection with the diner and sort of serving them. Flipping it on its head, how have your dining habits changed and evolved over time, and sort of how has that potentially impacted your cooking? Yeah.
I think for me personally, recently with family commitments, I think I dine out a little bit differently to before. You know, I think before I could choose whichever restaurant I wanted to go to without being questioned, but now I have to consult with a pescatarian husband and a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, so making a decision of where to go for lunch is in itself quite a mission. Yeah, I think in terms of how I cook differently, I guess I have more regards to healthy recipes, and that's kind of what's in my mind often now. And like there's a classic dish in Soho, pork miso udon, and I'm even considering changing that possibly to a version that I do at home, which is a little bit more healthy. But I know I'll get a lot of pushback for that. So maybe not, that's to be confirmed. But yeah, I guess something like that.
Masaki?
After the COVID, especially, I think everybody agreed to that. Even me working in the kitchen, we never thought, as a chef, we don't have a time to kind of relax and think about my health, for example. You know, it's a busy environment, you just need to keep on working. But when the COVID hit and the first lockdown came out, and I didn't know what to do, I was so nervous, and nobody's sure that what's going to happen. Then little by little, you know, I start to review what I've been doing and then what is going to be the future. Then obviously the health side or mental health side of the kind of awareness kicked in. And since then, actually, it's a while ago, but my main focus is to serve the healthy food. There tend to be restaurants serve tasty food or like a flashy food, but you know, not always comes with the health. But I wanted my restaurant to be like everyday use restaurant for the guests, so the guests can come back like twice a week, 3 times a week, and they still feel healthy. After the meal, full meal, you're full, but not feeling heavy. That is the kind of concept. So that I'm, for example, you know, I'm playing with a koji nowadays. I don't know if you guys know koji. Koji is the equivalent of yeast in you know, the Japan. And you know, koji can be a salty condiment or like a sweetened, you know, sweetener, let's say, depending on how you grow them. And it's a lot healthier than the actual sugar. And Japanese cuisine has a lot of sugary kind of dishes. So I'm replacing everything from the sugar to the koji-based healthy sweetener. So that is changing, obviously. You know, after you eat, you feel different, you feel good, and then we feel confident as a chef. Right? What we are doing is something good, not only a taste, but for the guests as well. So yeah, healthy food is definitely one of the main focus.
I would say I spend most of my free time going out to eat and drink, and restaurants have always felt a bit more like home for me than sometimes sitting at home. So I do spend most of my free time and money in hospitality establishments. I do think in general though, the last year or two, I've been pulled a lot more to your kind of mom and pop shops, the really kind of neighborhood staples that might not provide you with, you know, silver service or, you know, a perfectly thought out dining room, but establishments that contain a lot of heart. I think that's something that I'm a bit more willing to kind of, yeah, spend my time in. In terms of how it's affected my own cooking, funnily enough, like I think one of the nicest compliments someone said was how they felt after having my food and not feeling bogged down and heavy. And I cook, you know, Italian home food, you know, food that you might expect your nonna to make, and that's what my mother cooked in her restaurant. So I don't know if much has actually changed. Maybe one day Tiella will grow up a little, but for now it's still, yeah, home cooking, I think.
Yeah. And then sort of staying in the mind of the diner a little bit, I think, you know, it's a bit of a frustrating one, because we all ideally would love to, you know, be able to eat out all the time, because I think most people in this room probably love it. But definitely recently, you know, it is getting more expensive to eat out, and it is getting harder probably as a restaurateur chef as well to kind of like keep your costs where they are and keep prices the same for diners. And I guess I just wondered sort of, what are your feelings on sort of, as a chef, do you feel a responsibility to try and keep prices accessible for diners, or is it a reality that if your costs are going up, your prices have to go up? And sort of where do you strike that balance? Maybe starting with you, Dara.
Yeah, I think it's a really tricky one to navigate. The spreadsheets and the budgets really do not lie. I personally really like cooking that food that is accessible, and perhaps now the pressure is more, the one that I feel is having to be a bit of a brand and not just being a chef is something that's very, very strange to navigate, and it doesn't feel sometimes like just having your restaurant or, you know, cooking in there every day is quite enough. So you feel like you have to have a very diverse set of skills and kind of engagement with the public and with guests. In terms of costings, when I was at the pub, I was very, very conscious of providing a price point that was welcoming. You know, I think pubs are an incredible, you know, institution in this country, and they should be accessible. So that was something I always thought about. I don't think I had a dish that was ever over £30, and we were serving produce that you get in, you know, some of the highest end restaurants in the city.
Yeah, it is a big challenge we all are facing, I guess. How I'm dealing with it now is that I haven't changed the prices of the items at all. Instead, what I'm doing is that, first of all, the chef's trainings I provide became stricter, because think about it, if you fillet the fish, depending on your skill level, even if you are good, it doesn't matter. On the bone, there's some leftover flesh there, and if you scrape off by spoons, right, that's supposed to be goes into the bin, but it's nothing wrong with that quality itself. So why don't you make it like creative tartare, for example, or fish cake, or whatever, these kind of things. You know, so I'm trying to change my team's perception and try to keep the cost down. And then also what I'm doing is that underrated ingredient, such as like British, like, you know, the wild vegetables, for example. That's what I'm learning now, or even the fish. Lucky enough, I've dealing with normally Cornish fishermen directly. No, using the middlemen whatsoever, and then I physically go down and learn how they fish, and then instead I show them how to, do the how to use a killing method. Probably you heard of ikejime, which is the Japanese killing method. It's a very humane way to kill, and then also keep the freshness to a different level. So we build the mutual relation with them. Anyway, when they go out to a sea. They have a lot of bycatch, which is then what is they're trying to catch, for example, lobster using in a pot. But in the lobster, there are lots of different species there, which they cannot sell it, such as like conger eel, right? It's such aggressive, scary, almost like a dragon-looking kind of thing. On the boards, they're like jumping around, and then they can bite you. And then actually, one of the fishermen, has got bitten over the foot, and then they are bleeding or whatsoever. But if we could utilize that underrated ingredient, the fisherman's going to be happy because there's some money created for them, and then also I can purchase really cheap. And if I could make a really good dish, then a win-win scenario. So that's how we are trying to deal with now.
Yeah, I think I agree with all of that as well. And we work with small suppliers too, who are also very much affected by these cost increases. And it's important for restaurants to maintain these relationships with these farmers and these producers. So as a result, some of it does have to get passed on to as a price increase. But I think like anything, you choose which battles to fight for and which ones to kind of let go. And we've been learning that as well. And I think also with training staff, which is a big cost, so we've been focusing a lot on trying to nourish and retain staff, and that ultimately, helps the cost as well.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of points you sort of all said there which I want to pick up on. But the first, which you mentioned, Dara, about being a brand, and kind of, I guess, what responsibility as a chef do you feel to put sort of like people's bums on seats in your restaurant beyond your cooking, and like where do you think that sort of like line is? And I know we were chatting before everyone arrived about creating products with deli, and how much is that something which is to drive the restaurant, and how much is that something to sort of explore creative things? Yeah, sort of where does that responsibility lie, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting nowadays with food. There's so many different opportunities. If you even just look at social media and the way that that works, or how you might work with a brand per se. It's tough because, running a restaurant and being there and present for your team and for your guests, and having the energy to actually not just cook a plate of food, but be in the space and transfer that energy to your customers. It takes a lot out of you. So to then, do the extra bits on the side, it's ultimately very, very exhausting. But it's, I guess it paints a much wider picture that when I was at the pub, I definitely felt like, right, now's the moment. I should take all of these different opportunities that are coming my way. But ultimately, I think I'm a lot happier if I'm in the kitchen and in the restaurant. But you have to diversify and you have to be quite clever. And I even started a TikTok, which is not something that I thought I would do. And I was just filming. I quite like using Instagram and just storytelling about food and my family and, the thought that goes behind a dish, or, how we work as a team. And so I started filming just little excerpts of the day. And I started making little come to work with me videos, which is something I, would have cringed at a little while ago. And then sort of by the end of it, we were having guests come down and say, I saw you on TikTok. And it actually was a really nice feeling. It was like, welcome, great, you're here. So I think energy reservation is something that as a cook, our health, what you mentioned before as well, it's a really important part of the puzzle. And I think you're not a never-ending battery pack. So it's tough when to make the choices.
Yeah. Well, as a chef, obviously the most comfortable place in the kitchen, even if it's stressful, that's the best way. But current economic situation, if you consider, like, I'm not going out as much as before because of the price itself is going crazy. Obviously as a business owner, I feel so much responsibility to fill the restaurant. What we were doing as a team now is that obviously, we're going to push the social media, whatever, these kind of things to gain more number. But rather than that, what we are focusing is that not only cooking, but the restaurant as a whole, we are actually reviewing the service itself, how to welcome the guest, and then what the guest wants. We just try to forget about whatever we know. We are living in a modern world, which is like totally different. Before COVID, it was totally different, but nowadays it's totally, we are kind of running the business in a different world. So we are trying to retrain ourselves by opening our senses to maximum sensitivity, and try to kind of tick the box of the expectation. That's a minimum requirement, and then try to do our touch as an orchestra. I think that's something that we are working on.
I think it feels like the recent maybe 5 years, people's interest and focus have been changing slightly from just food to more maybe about the story or the people behind an establishment, and that's kind of where the social media bit comes along, I think. And these platforms help us to market and promote ourselves and our restaurants, and it'll keep growing, these platforms. So I think as a business and as a chef, it's just something we now have to try and embrace and enjoy it, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And then I also wanted to come back to something you said, Masaki, around sort of using every ounce of the fish. And I know sort of sustainability is a big sort of core element of what you're doing at Dining's SW3. But I kind of wanted to ask maybe sort of how do you think in terms of that connection with the diners, sort of what impact do you think that has on your connection with people eating in your restaurant?
Sustainability is a big topic everywhere in the world now. A lot of time this word is used for commercial kind of purposes, but it is not actually. I've been working in this industry like long enough to know how the food ingredient, the scene has changed. Lots of fish species are pushed to extinction, or the environmental issue is being caused, whatever so on. We need to tackle it for sure. And that's a big thing. And then also that is coming out from, my parents' training, basically. How I've been trained is that in the morning, when I come in, obviously I start to prep the fish or whatever so on. And then first thing my parents comes in, what they do is check the bin. If I throw the the usable piece, I'm gonna have a nightmare for a whole day. That's the thing. So that was, part of me. And then it's a part of Japanese culture, isn't it? It's to pay the respect towards the ingredient, because we are actually consuming the life, even if it's a vegetable. So we say before the meal, we say always itadakimasu, means like, thank you for your life. We pay respect towards to that. So it's a natural kind of thought process. And then what I find out in the recent kind of, the chef team, for example, like my young chef team I'm talking about, they're extremely well experienced, but they don't focus on the wastage, or they don't pay enough respect towards the ingredient. And I thought, okay, why don't you use this? Yeah, but chef, this is the best parts. Okay, best parts, I understand that, but it's our job. These, let's say, trims of ingredient to be in like next level, like a brilliant dish, it's our skill. And that's the excitement, the exciting part. That's what I call skill, personally. So yeah, I felt a lot of kind of gaps. So what I'm doing now is that, as I said, I'm going down to Cornwall, goes onto the boat, very like, the bumpy ride for 6 hours, and then catch the smelly fish. Yeah, it is smelly. When you come back, you don't want to even go to a pub because everybody's going to look at, what the, that's the kind of look you're going to get. But I'm learning a lot from them, learning a lot. And their work is not easy at all. And, every year, unfortunately, there's an accident with the small boats, blah, 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 blah. They are putting their life online. And we need to respect that, And then those are the fishermen, small boats, day boat fishermen, who never use the, unfriendly method of catching. They're always choosing the, environmentally friendly method to catch. It's more difficult and it's more costing, but, they think about the future population of the, whatever the species around. And, working with them is such a precious thing. And then I need to, pass that message to our guests as well, together with the underrated ingredient as well. People just don't know about the food. As I said, like 25 years ago, London market about the Japanese food it was totally different. Now, lots of people knows a lot about Japanese cuisine. And sometimes, I'm learning from the guest. Oh, chef, I went to Japan. I had to eat, this one. That was brilliant. What is it? Literally, that's questions. So, it's all about the education. I think, there's a perception that, for example, like fish sperm cell, right? Exactly that face, right? But in Japan, it's such a highly rated part of the fish as well. This is all about the perception. I'm sure, 10 years later, if I mention about this part, everybody's going to be, yeah. So if I could take a part and then, introduce this culture, let's say, to the, the British audiences, I think that's, the perfect thing for me.
And then sort of going off the back of what Masaki's just said, Shuko, kind of having been open for 15 years now, and sort of how have you seen the way diners interact with your food change over time?
I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about people being interested in the people and the story, the personality behind a restaurant. I think more and more people are choosing where to dine out in that sort of method. You know, everyone has different interests and priorities, whether it's going to a place that's focused is on sustainability, maybe it's going to a fine dining place, maybe it's about low waste restaurants, maybe it's just about having a nice night out. But whatever it is, I think people are becoming more aware and conscious of how they choose a restaurant and why they're spending their money and they're spending their time in this restaurant, and it's about that matching your personality or your values. And I see, I think, far more of that sort of wave coming than ever before.
And do you ever, just out of interest, do you ever feel like you're sort of the values of Koya and your diners are sometimes out of line, and it needs to be an internal reflection, or do you kind of feel like normally that you attract the diners by sort of sharing those values externally? I don't know.
I think most of the time it's in line, and also I think you know, we make the food, we have the space for everyone to eat in, but at the end of the day, when they purchase it, and once it's in front of them, however they eat it, it's kind of up to them. So it's almost like the interpretation is always in their hands and not mine, and there's very little control that I can do on my side at that point. But yes, we do. I guess this is where social media and how messages are translated in these platforms and channels become quite important. And we, for example, have a very good media guy who does all our socials, and he's been with the company he had his 10-year anniversary with us last year, and he does all our blackboards, the beautiful illustrations, and I think he does an excellent job of sending out these messages. So yeah, we're quite lucky in the fact that we have these people and the team to support our messages.
And then Dara, coming to you, I suppose like doing hearty Italian food in an English pub is kind of sort of many Englishman's dream. So I suppose, yeah, sort of over your 20 months in the Compton Arms, how did you adjust to see how people had changed and interact with your cuisine, and sort of, yeah, what was the reception to it, and sort of, yeah.
I remember when I first moved to London, I heard Rachel Roddy on a podcast, and she said what a trattoria is to Italy is what a pub is to the UK, and I always felt very, very comfortable in pubs and loved them. I had been going to the Compton for years, and obviously knew it's got a great reputation for food, and it's laid back and really quite a jovial atmosphere. People responded to Tiella really well, and it kept the momentum really going, still is. At the same time, you know, it is quite a strange offering to put into a pub, and there were a few times where I went really wrong and came up with dishes that just did not suit the environment, and you know, those didn't really sell. But then over time, once you win over people's trust, and it's, you know, you pass that 1.5 year mark, and I guess people know that they're going to be getting something good to eat, they trust you a little more. So in the first year we put a tartare on, and I think, you know, for a few nights we sold a couple of portions, and then did that a year on, and you know, it was a really popular item on the menu. But yeah, I think as a chef you do have a responsibility to be really aware of your environment and who you're feeding, and not fight your environment too much. I think you have to kind of be very accepting of I guess on one hand, the limitations of being in a pub, and on the other hand, it's a very freeing environment for a cook. So I loved it. I really did.
Yeah, and then I suppose I was just going to ask in terms of being in a pub where sort of it is, Tiella isn't the whole pub and the Compton Arms isn't complete without Tiella, sort of, what were the limitations and the freedoms of that, and sort of where do you feel like it really allowed you to express yourself, but then equally maybe sort of, where were some of the limitations?
I mean, yeah, for those 20 months, you couldn't tell me that I didn't like own the pub. In my mind, I was like, this is my place. I've got to look after it like it's my home, which is something that, my parents, growing up in their restaurant, when I made the choice to get into hospitality, that was one of the pieces of advice that was given to me. It was like, any restaurant where you work, treat it as if it's yours. So I put a lot of love into that place and tried to really get to know who was coming in to eat. The freedoms, people, like I said, in the beginning it was a little tough. You would put items on the menu and they wouldn't land. I guess the limitations were that, for example, I didn't get to pick the front of house team, but the responsibility on me as a chef was how I trained them. And so you better believe I was printing out, maps of Italy. I was, teaching part-time pub staff who are at uni, the importance of like these very hyper-regional traditions. And I guess the essence of hospitality that I really grew up with and really love. So yeah, you do have to, I think if you get into residencies, you do really have to treat them as if they're your house and have respect for their rules, but also, try and bend them a little. The freedoms, on the other hand, I grew up in, a very specific type of restaurant. I trained in a number of different places here in London that were all quite different. And I would say a little bit more rigid in terms of menu structure and service. So kind of throwing that all up in the air and doing a very rustic trattoria was, very fun. But education, like you mentioned before, is very important. You have to know what you're trying to deliver and bring people along for the ride.
And then I suppose sort of having three chefs with very different concepts and very different sort of locations in London, I suppose, Misaki and then Shuko, sort of how do you feel the location of your restaurant and sort of the style of your restaurant has been formed by the area that it's located within, and how much do you feel like you can sort of push the boundaries of the diners who are coming to you? Obviously Misaki one side, but Shuko with a couple where maybe you've got very different crowds sort of from Soho to the city to Hackney. But maybe Misaki first.
Okay, so original restaurant of dinings opened in the middle of residential area in Paddington, and that compared to that, the one my restaurant is now is in the middle of Knightsbridge. It's totally different crowds, and it actually took me like almost 2 years to get to know and adjust, their demand and what we offer. It was a bit of a struggling moment, but at the same time, it trains me a lot, because when I was, previously working, in a lot of different places, but there was already format there, and then the crowd was already there, the followers there, so that all I needed is just, to keep on continuing the ethos they have, or like, they extend that parts. That was it. But opening in a Knightsbridge was totally different crowds. Lots of demand. I don't like this. Okay. So what can I do? So it was very tough. But obviously as a chef, I needed to adapt it. So literally, almost like every 2 weeks, I changed the menu, little by little, and then see the feedback, and then they communicate with the front of house very closely. Blah blah blah. So yeah, it took me a time, but it was a good learning kind of opportunity for me, I think.
Yeah, and then Shuko with your sort of three very different locations.
Yeah, we opened Soho first, and I think Soho, it's quite funny. I think Soho customers always want to go back to Soho. They don't want to go to City, they don't want to go to Hackney, they just want to go to Soho. And that's what I really love about Soho as well. It's such a neighborhood when you wouldn't expect it to be. And it's kind of retained that bit of special feeling throughout all these years. So yeah, Soho, we have our Soho people. And then in city, like Masaki-san was saying, when we moved to city, we found that we were demanded lots of different things at a speed as well. They wanted their orders really quickly. And, you know, it was a lot of adapting, but also, I guess our space in city is much bigger, and we've got the nicest toilet there. That is reflected on a slightly more maybe mature looking restaurant in that way. And then Hackney, we put this bar next to the windows, which I meant it to be a standing bar, but no one stood up and ate. Everyone considered that to be like a drinking spot, so they were sipping or waiting for their meal. I really wanted people to stand and eat, but we ended up putting stools there, which makes me think maybe if it doesn't work in Hackney, maybe I just need to wait 5 more years. But yeah, I think Hackney, in terms of area, we get lots of, it's a residential area, so it's quite, again, a different crowd to the other two, and it's got its busy times and quiet times in a very different way to Soho and City as well.
I've been given the 2-3 minute sign, but I know it's probably a bit of a downturn to end on, but I feel like we'd be remiss, considering recent events, to not talk about sort of the lack maybe of representation of women in the kitchen. And maybe this is one more for you, Shuko and Dara. I just wanted to ask sort of, you know, the industry obviously has had a certain reputation in the past, and I think it's taken a lot of steps towards moving away from that, but equally still at the top end especially, sort of there isn't that representation of women in the kitchen or women restaurateurs generally. And I just wanted to ask why you think that is, and where you think sort of we're still kind of not quite hitting the spot.
I think the impression that a lot of these films or media kind of portrayed about, in the 90s probably, about, you know, tough male chefs in the industry just was so strong, I think, within everyone's mind that, you know, and it did attract probably a lot of young male chefs to come into the industry, and probably didn't, most likely, attract female chefs to come into the industry. And it's just something that is quite hard to shift. But I think if like-minded people continue to talk about it, and also I think we just need the commitments from restaurants and chefs to have that inclusive environment in their restaurants, in their workplace, then I think people will automatically start talking about it as a reality rather than just on paper. And you know, I still think the best way to spread news is by word of mouth. And if people started talking, oh, I work in this restaurant, I'm a housewife, and I've got 2 kids, but this restaurant told me that I can still work and, you know, have a career as a chef. And that's kind of what we need, I think. Also, I always think it's important to talk about female chefs, but it's also important to talk not about female or male chefs, but just, you know, chefs and individuals. And, you know, it's about equal opportunity. It's about, you know, when I look at a team, what do I look for? What is the best balance in that kitchen? And if it's about gender, or if it's about age, or, you know, maybe it's just more about personality and what individual brings to the table. So I think that's what I would love for people to start talking about more, individuals rather than female or male.
Yeah, I think like given a headline today in the Times where apparently sexism does not exist in kitchens, you know, it's unfortunate that at very high levels there seems to be a real lack of commitment to just diversity in general. It's not just about women as well, I think. I worked for one chef early in my career that was very, very committed to maternity leave packages and contracts. And that's something that, as a business owner, I remember the first time that I started to think about that. In terms of a solution, yeah, I think the media has a lot to answer for. I don't know if necessarily popular media regarding the portrayal of chefs has really changed all that much. If we look at Boiling Point, if The Bear, you know, it's always one angle of restaurants and kitchens that gets highlighted. And I'd really love that narrative to change, because there's so much sort of beautiful, genuine human contact that happens in restaurants and in hospitality spaces. But I also think, you know, go right to the highest level. If we're talking, you know, the Michelin awards this year, I'm sure many people in this room, when looking at the lineup, were ultimately incredibly disappointed. Yeah, I don't necessarily have a solution, but I do think that there's, narratives in the media need to switch it up a little bit, and there's a lot of varying discussions around diversity that all really stem back to the same systems of oppression, and to tackle that in the workplace. Yeah, I definitely don't have the answer for it, but I'm hoping that, you know, with more discussion and more, wider interest, hopefully things change. Yeah.
Thanks so much. We have now run out of time. I've also completely forgotten at the beginning to say John from Anglo Thai couldn't be here because he's ill. In case you're wondering where he's been. Also, thank you so much to Toast, who we're doing this chef series in partnership with. They've obviously made this happen. And then also thanks to the Hoxton so much for hosting us in this lovely room. But most of all, thank you to you three for a really insightful and enjoyable conversation. So yeah. Before we round of applause, food and drink afterwards, hang around, say hey, and thank you all so much for coming as well and listening. I think it's been good.